All right. Now that we're all here, thank you everyone for coming. I'm really delighted to introduce Kwame and let him talk a little bit about his FPV work. And because we're running a little bit late, I will not go into great detail, but hopefully you'll be as excited about some of the new technologies that he's been able to bring to reality right now. Go ahead, Kwame.
Um, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Pierce, and welcome everyone to my PhD thesis presentation. Today, I will be presenting the results of my work on advancing foam-based floating PV systems in challenging environments. This work was undertaken at the FAST lab at Western University under the supervision of Dr. Joshua Pierce. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank my committee members who took time out of their busy schedule to review this work. My thesis bridges the gap between PV systems, open hardware, and environmental analysis. In the coming slides, I will be explaining the background and context of this study before I move on to the content of the thesis. Solar PV systems remain the fastest growing electricity source worldwide. As of 2024, solar PV has grown above 2 terawatts. However, this technology, because it's a low density power technology, there is a big major challenge that is facing, that is land use conflict. To address those land-use conflict, non-conventional technology are emerging. Among those technology, we count BIPV, which is the integration of solar solar PV into a building structure. We have PV carport, which is the installation of solar panels on top of a parking lot. We have agrivoltaics, which is the co-location of solar panels and agriculture on the same land. And finally, we have floating PV, which is the focus on this thesis, where solar panels are installed on top of a water surface. My thesis bridges multiple research at the FAST lab. So at the center here, I have my foam-based FPV thesis. In terms of the project relating to cost-effective PV rack at the FAST lab, I focus on foam racking. When it comes to open source research tools, we have co-developed with one of the local companies here in Canada, the data acquisition board called the Jericho, which is dedicated to outdoor solar PV experiments, but is capable of much more. When it comes to the Pale Blue Hydrogen project, we focus on powering an AEM, which is an anion exchange membrane hydrogen generator with an FPV system. And in terms of PV sustainability, we focus on the life cycle analysis of the foam-based FPV. The objective of my thesis are grouped under different themes. I have three core themes, which are the FPV co-benefit framework, the foam-based FPV design and technical analysis, and the environmental and economic performances. To sustain those core themes, I have additional themes here, which are the application of foam-based FPV, modeling advances and study implications and limitations and future studies. I will be following this outline here throughout this presentation. Here on the slide, we have the six chapters of my thesis, and because each chapter, some of the element of the chapter interlock, I decided to make the presentation according to the previous theme that I mentioned instead of chapter by chapter. The first theme here is the FPV co-benefit framework, which is chapter 2 of my thesis, chapter 1 being the introduction. Non-conventional PV systems that we mentioned before have been found to offer multiple co-benefits. The term co-benefit refers to additional positive outcomes or services provided by a PV system that extend beyond the main purpose of electricity generation. And across the literature, multiple co-benefits were mentioned, including CO2 emission all the way to land savings and a lot of other benefits in between. The challenge, though, is that despite these co-benefits being mentioned in the literature, most of the time they're rarely quantified or their significance discussed. This leads us to look into the following research questions. What are the co-benefits that emerge from non-conventional PV systems, and how are those co-benefits quantified in the PV literature? We use Prisma analysis to review up to 261 research articles where we identify multiple co-benefits and we group them under 13 categories. And all these 13 categories related to all the non-conventional PV systems that we mentioned. But for floating PV specifically, which is the focus of this thesis, we have identified greenhouse gas emission, water loss reduction, water quality improvement, power-related improvement, and land resource conservation. However, through our analysis, we have identified that some additional co-benefits seen in other non-conventional can also apply to FPV, including economic value, agricultural productivity, and food security and welfare. Through our study, we have revealed an incomplete reporting of PV attributes and co-benefit in the literature. On the slide here, I'm showing that the PV attribute that we're talking about relate to PV technology, module efficiency, or system location. These attributes are important specifically when comparing multiple PV technology because two PV systems that have the same power will be generating a different amount of energy depending on where they are located. And this is important to mention in the literature. Otherwise, the comparison that we do of our PV system to determine where the research should go becomes more challenging. In terms of the co-benefit reporting, we have highlighted here some of the results that we got for FPV. Specifically for water quality improvement, we can see that 33% of studies that of the FPV studies that we reviewed mentioned this co-benefit, but only 3% actually quantified them, and none of those studies explain what that co-benefit even means for FPV systems at large. To address this challenge, we propose a co-benefit table that lays the foundation for an evaluation framework. So we listed the benefits, we we suggested proposed quantification metric for each benefit, and we also suggested quantification metric unit. We identified the software that we use in the literature, and we proposed open source alternatives so that this can be democratized. For example, for GHG emission reduction, this is a co-benefit that's already quantified in the literature in terms of CO2 equivalent, and the unit will be tons of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour of energy produced. Example software includes SEMA Pro or Click LCA, and an open source alternative exists in OpenLCA. For water quality improvement, on the other hand, most of the both the proposed metric all the way to the open source alternative are specified as TBD because no proposed quantification metric was found and no software exists to this day to evaluate these co-benefits, leading to future work to look into that. The next theme of our presentation is foam-based FPV design and technical analysis that cover chapter 3 and chapter 4 of our thesis. Across the literature, there are different types of FPV systems that have been mentioned. One of the most common one being the pontoon-based FPV, which is being the pontoon-based FPV, which is one of the most commercially used. However, this system rely on rigid PV modules, which are heavy. Therefore, they require a lot of material for the pontoon to make the PV system float. The FPV panel tested in this thesis is a recent design that was proposed in 2020 at Michigan Tech, where foam is used as the racking. Here we have a graphic showing the system layout. where we have a flexible module. And because the module is flexible, only weighing 2 kilograms compared to the 20 to 30 kilograms of regular PV modules, we were able to use polyethylene foam to make the system float, which made the racking cheaper. However, this system is very new, therefore there is not a lot of experimentation that has been done on it, and specifically, no operation in cold climate was proven. This is just true for FPV systems at large because FPV systems are rarely installed in a cold climate, specifically where the water freezes. Bringing us to our research question for this team, does foam-based FPV operate in cold climate and ice condition? And how to prevent ice formation around the FPV system during winter? To address these questions, we use a combined experimental and modeling approach that was adopted here. In terms of the design assembly, we designed a 7 kilowatt foam-based FPV system which was equipped with 4 pumps and air bubblers. The air bubblers were strategically placed around the PV system to ensure that we could test our ice prevention technology. When it comes to system deployment, the system was deployed as the Western Environmental Science Field Station here in near a location in London at Ilderton, Ontario. We use the Jericho data acquisition system to collect both weather data and PV temperature data. And we use those data to model our systems. Specifically, we did a temperature and electrical modeling, ice prevention modeling using air bubblers, and water evaporation modeling. As mentioned before, we used the Jericho open source data acquisition system, which was a system that was designed and validated to collect weather data and PV temperature. It relies on a Raspberry Pi core, which is the brain of the system, to which an Arduino Nano is connected. And the Arduino Nano is responsible for collecting the data from our thermistors, our humidity sensor, and so on, which it then transmits to the Raspberry Pi, which stores the data or can send it to the cloud. And because we're using the Raspberry Pi, which has a lot of capacity, we're able to use additional sensors in terms of air camera or visible camera to be able to surveil the system. We compare the performance of the data acquisition system to commercial counterpart. Here we're showing the temperature and irradiation curve, and we show that the system was able to perform comparably to a commercial counterpart with an R2 score of 99%. We use multivariate linear and polynomial regression to derive FPV temperature profile and to model energy prediction. FPV temperature profile is important to quantify because it allows us to be able to analyze how the FPV system is performing. Here, we use the collected weather input data that we fed into both models, and then we also fed the measured PV temperature. And by training our model, we're able to predict the PV temperature. We use the predicted PV temperature in addition to weather data inputs and the PV module specification to compare our predicted model to previous existing floating PV models, including the Camus model and regular ground-based PV models, as well as a specific model design for FPV system. We then use the predicted PV temperature into our energy performance prediction, and the performance that was evaluated was fed into our economic and environmental model. One expected behavior that we observed in the module temperature was during the winter. We noticed that first what we did is that we split our data into non-winter data and into winter data. So we were able to see that both the linear and the polynomial model were performing similarly for the non-winter data, which is what we would expect from a system where usually the temperature of the FPV varies linearly with the environmental data, However, during the in the winter specific data, what we notice is that the linear regression was performing poorly compared to the polynomial regression, showing that there might be a nonlinear behavior of the FPV system during when it's in direct contact with freezing water. So to establish our temperature model, we combine both the nonlinear, both the winter data and the non-winter model. And using that, we compare our model to the existing model in the literature. Here we can see that most models perform similarly during the non-winter period, which are at the beginning here and at the end here, because our data started in August, not in January. And then during the winter, we can see that most model predict a lower temperature than what we actually observed. And then the only model that came closer to the actual data that we measured was the Feynman FPV, which was a model where the PV was semi-submerged, similarly as our system. However, this model was only tested in winter. Sorry, it was only tested in summer period, not in winter. Using those models, we predicted energy performance of the system. We showed that once again, in line with what we observed regarding the temperature, the Feynman FPV system was the one system that came closer to the energy prediction using the temperature that we measured. And the other models were off up to 2%, even though 2% doesn't seem as much because we're here at a smaller scale. If this technology becomes mainstream and larger systems are being installed, 2% can be a major difference when choosing the inverter. We then use the weather data input and the pod parameters that we fed into a modified Penman-Monteith model. So this model was designed for water evaporation, first designed by Penman and modified by Monteith, then modified further by us to adapt it to foam-based FPV. And we were able to quantify the water evaporation of the system. And then one contribution of this work is the modified Ashton model, which was primarily designed to prevent ice melting around boats and piers. But then we use that we adapt that to our FPV model. And then we're able to calculate the pump energy requirement to melt the ice around the system. Using the water evaporation, we calculated water savings that we fed into our life cycle analysis. The pump energy requirement was combined with the PV performance into an energy budget to determine ice prevention energy losses of the system. Our results show that air bubblers can prevent ice formation at a cost of the energy. We tested 3 different configurations. In configuration 1 and 2, we placed bubblers at the system edges, a specific location, while in configuration 3, we calculated how much bubblers will be needed to actually cover the total surface of the PV system. In configuration 1, we found that only 0.02% of the annual energy will be used towards ice prevention, while in configuration 3, we can lose up to 14.5%. These are some experimental images showing 2 FPV systems located in the same location at our field station, one with the bubblers and one without. On the left, the one without the bubblers remain under ice, while on the right, the one with the bubblers shows that the bubblers is efficient at preventing ice formation at this scale. We use the Penman-Monteith model to quantify water evaporation, and we quantify that as a function of pond storage. Our PV system covered 3% of the pond that was available to us. And using that coverage, we estimated between 0.07 to 0.18 cube meters for a saving per month. And at 50% coverage, we will be able to save enough water to irrigate a small vegetable farm. For this team, these are the highlights from our studies, foam-based FPV systems is feasible in cold region, but requires careful design. Bubblers can be used to prevent ice formation at a fraction of the PV energy, and foam-based PV temperature has a potential nonlinear behavior when in contact with freezing water that requires further analysis. Next is our economic and environmental performances that span across chapter 4 and chapter 7 of our thesis. We use the NREL, which is the National Renewable Energy Lab in the US, cost breakdown to compare the CAPEX and net present value of land-based PV and our proposed system. In terms of capital expenditure, only considering the material cost, so we didn't consider the installation cost in here because our system was student installed, so we didn't have any labor cost there, so we didn't consider that. We've shown that our system, even though more expensive than land-based system, is very close. And then we have also shown that for the net present value, the system will be cost effective if installed in areas where electricity price is high. We've shown 4.2 years when the electricity price is $0.9 per kilowatt hour. Foam-based FPV system can be economically competitive with land-based if the cost of the module drop. This is important because the flexible module that we use are very designed for niche applications as for now, using mostly in boats and RVs. Therefore, their cost is up to 3 times higher than the current mainstream rigid PV modules on the market. We have therefore run a sensitivity analysis to show that if the cost of the flexible PV modules becomes competitive with rigid modules, we will have cost of electricity in the range of regular land-based systems in Canada. Next is our environmental impact analysis. We use a life cycle analysis, which is a methodology that allows one to assess the environmental impact of the system of product throughout its entire lifetime. And for each life cycle analysis, the standard is to do 4 main steps. First, defining the goal and scope of the study. In our case, the goal was to analyze the life cycle impact of our foam-based FPV system, define the life cycle inventory, which is analyzing the material input that goes into the foam-based lifetime from the manufacture of the PV modules all the way to the end of life. Then you use specific methods to analyze the environmental impact, and we interpret the results. We use a cradle-to-grave analysis to conduct our LCA on a simulated 10 megawatt foam base located in Nevada, because that's where we have data for a lake, with a functional unit of 650 gigawatt hour. So this is the scope, how the scope of an LCA look like when we analyze the life cycle from raw material extraction to the product manufacture. We talk about cradle to gate, and when we go from raw material extraction all the way to the end of life, we'll talk about cradle to grave, which is the scope of our analysis. The material inventory was derived from measured data and the IEA PVPS life cycle inventory. That was specifically for the PV cell manufacture, because the cell used are the same cell used in rigid modules. However, for the encapsulating material, which is the front and back layer of the system, the manufacturer of the PV module didn't specify which material they were. So we use Fourier transform infrared analysis and electron microscopy to determine what those materials were, as well as their thickness. And then we were able to define their weight, and for the weight of the remaining items, we deducted those from the weight of the other components. We use 3 main impact assessment methods to quantify the FPV environmental footprint: the cumulative energy demand quantify the amount of energy that goes into a system throughout its entire lifetime. And the energy payback time is how much time it takes the system to produce the amount of energy that will go throughout its entire lifetime. Similarly, the global warming potential evaluates the amount of CO2 or the amount of greenhouse gases emitted by a system, and the CO2 payback time uh, quantifies how much time it will take the system to offset the CO2 that goes into its lifetime. And finally, the water scarcity index was our third methodology here that evaluated water footprint, where we were able to quantify the amount of water that goes into the lifetime of the system, and we deducted the amount of water that the system could save. Our results show that the lifetime of the PV module has the most impact on the system's environmental and on the system's environmental impact. Here we have varied the lifetime of the PV module for 5 to 10 years, and we've seen that when varying those lifetime and keeping the foam lifetime at 15 years, we were able to achieve a CO2 payback time between 0.83 and 4.29 years, and an energy payback time between 1.3 and 6.51 years. We perform a similar analysis while varying the foam lifetime, and we have seen that even when we vary the foam lifetime, the results do not change significantly, confirming that the PV module lifetime is the main driver of the environmental impact. Foam-based FPV could become the lowest carbon footprint PV technology if the PV modules have a minimum lifetime of 26.6 years. So when we set the lifetime of the system to 30 years, we showed that the CO2 payback time could be as low as 0.82 years, which is one of the lowest recorded compared to ground-based PV systems in the literature. Our energy payback time, however, was not the lowest, but was located in the lowest range. And for the water footprint, we were able to achieve a 21.5 cube meters. And when we added the water savings, it dropped to 16.3 cube meters per megawatt hour, which was 5 times lower than pontoon-based FPV systems. Next is the applications of our foam-based study, covering chapter 5 and chapter 6 of our study. Our foam-based FPV system was used to power and characterize the operation of an anion exchange membrane electrolyzer. Here we have the setup of the system, where floating PV system was used to power the electrolyzer through MPPT controllers and a 3-phase inverter bank, as well as a DC power supply. The battery here was installed to ensure that the system will operate even during cloud coverage. Here is a picture of the actual system at Ilderton, showing both the electrical box, the PV system on the water, and the electrolyzer system. We quantify the electrical and thermal behavior of the system using the experimental data that we collected, and we run 2 different experiments, one with the electrolyzer being heated and one where the electrolyzer were not heated. In the electrical model, we quantify at each electrical conversion stage the output energy over the input energy to determine the efficiency of the system. For the energy conversion, we did the same while using the amount of energy that goes into each stage to generate the quantity of energy contained in 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And for the thermal model, we use a simplified flat plate model to analyze the heat exchange between the system and the environment. The electrolyzer achieved high efficiency and hydrogen flow across the test condition. Here we can see that the system level electrical efficiency remained consistent across both the heated and the non-heated experiment. And similarly, this was similar for the energy conversion efficiency as well. However, the non-heated system had better thermal efficiency because since the system was not insulated, there was a lot of loss to the environment. when the system was heated. Uh, Conversely, the heated system generated more hydrogen and oxygen compared to the non-heated system, in line with what has been observed in the literature. We analyzed the losses using this Sankey diagram, and we have shown that the total loss of the system is 21.5 kilowatt hour per kilogram, and more than half of that loss is coming from the inverter. This shows that for electrolyzers, specifically for anion exchange electrolyzer that can tolerate voltage variation, there is a benefit into powering them directly from the PV systems. And future studies will need to look into direct DC to DC converters that will allow to eliminate the inverter losses, making the system efficiency go up even further. We combine So combining the FPV and AEM, we have demonstrated one of the lowest specific energy for hydrogen generation in the literature. Here we can see that the range shown in the literature is between 76.7 and 48.2 kilowatt hour per kilogram. We were able to reach 45, which gets us closer to the IRENA target of getting below 42 kilowatt hour per kilogram by 2050. One interesting result is the hydrogen purity. Industrial processes require hydrogen purity of 99.9. We were only able to reach 99.2 because our collection system was student made, and we collected the gas outside. There could have been air intake into our collection system before the tests. Another interesting application of foam-based FPV is terminal lake disappearance prevention. Terminal lakes are lakes around the world that lose water either through water diversion and evaporation, and this has been made worse by climate change. And in a lot of locations, countries are starting to think of using floating cover to enable water retention. This is because when terminal lakes are evaporating, the total dissolved solid or TDS level increases, causing marine life to suffer. Therefore, a better solution that we are suggesting is using the flat tilt foam-based FPV that will reduce exposed surface area, but in addition, also generate electricity. We conducted a case study on Walker Lake that shows that FPV can save up to 52 millions of cube meter if 50% of the lake is covered, saving up to 8 millions in terms of Canadian dollars. And when 50% is covered as well, it can generate enough energy to power 2 million average household in the US. Moving on to our modeling advances and the implications of our study. Across the 6 research projects, our thesis delivers multiple contributions. First, for the framework and co-benefit evaluation, the gaps that we reported in the PV study are important to highlight because we want PV system to be able to be compared on the same basis, and we're pushing for academic journal to integrate PV nameplates in PV publication that analyze performance so that those key attributes can be reported, making cross comparison of PV system easy. We have categorized and proposed formal definition of co-benefit and lay out the groundwork for a formal framework for quantifying them, and propose the levelized cost of electricity co-benefit, which does not aim to replace LCOE, but add on top of it to be able to quantify the co-benefit in addition to the cost of electricity. For the cold climate FPV experiment, we identified the nonlinear behavior of FPV modules in cold region. We then proposed our hybrid regression model for FPV. We conceptualized air bubblers model for ice prevention and designed and validated the open source data acquisition for PV. For our FPV systems application, we investigated the first kilowatt scale foam-based FPV system in winter condition because in the literature, most systems were limited to watt scale, and we demonstrated an experimental coupling of the FPV with an AEM electrolyzer. and shown that FPV can be a climate adaptation strategy for terminal lakes. In terms of environmental life cycle, we were able to achieve one of the lowest CO2 payback time when our foam-based FPV lifetime is above 26.6 years. And we revealed a very low water footprint as well. Our thesis contribute to society by providing a way to prevent land challenges for PV modules by locating them on water, and also by offering alternative to plastic cover for conserving water resources. For industry, we have opened this system can open the PV market to lightweight PV modules and reservoir owners, as well as hybrid system that can leverage hydropower infrastructure and improve water quality. For policy makers, they should consider incentives that recognize co-benefits, such as water conservation credits and more funding programs towards FPV research. And for researchers, the Jericho data acquisition enable modular data acquisition for field-based solar experimentation and much more. And researchers should also consider investigating floating PV in cold region, especially in the winter behavior and the ice clearing methods. This brings us to our limitations and future studies. Our study revealed environmental, structural, and data challenges critical for future PV studies and design. Specifically, algae growth was one of our major challenges because we were located on an agricultural farm, and in the summer, during when the runoff came into the pond, algae tend to crawl on top of the module. This is very challenging because due to the nature of the front layer of our module, it will be very difficult to remove algae once they crawl on top of the system. In terms of material and structural integrity, one of our main challenge was adhesive delamination. So because we were working in an area where biological experiment could be conducted, we use an environmental safe adhesive, which is semi-permanent, not permanent. Therefore, this was a main challenge to overcome. Similarly, foam surface degradation was also a challenge, and the anchoring and mooring tension. Despite us considering the change in water level in the pond, the level of drought this year was unprecedented, even exceeding what has been historically recorded. Therefore, this caused our system to be under enormous tension during the summer when the water was evaporating, showing that beyond this study, FPV studies in general in the future should consider future climate impact when designing their mooring and anchoring systems. Our system experimentation was only limited to 1 year, and our evaporation model was non-experimental. It was simulated, and our system was not connected to the grid. Finally, for the limitations, the pond access and safety can be a big challenge, and we did not quantify the impact on marine life and did not quantify the long-term system degradation since we only analyze the system on a 1-year basis. Our challenges, however, paved the way for several future studies, including developing a flexible framework to quantify LCOE-CB, having the system being grid connected to have more long-term data and operational data, and improve the temperature modeling. Further systems are needed to validate our findings, especially a control test in an industrial freezer can help improve the ice melt model and analyze the system in different winter conditions. Structural optimization will be needed to analyze the impact of wave and winds if this system was to be installed in a water body that is very wavy, and the anchoring will need, the foam adhesion will also need to be improved. One idea that we have could be to laminate the foam behind the module instead of gluing them. And in terms of environmental sustainability, it will be important to analyze the ecological response, specifically the microplastic degradation, because right now, foam-based, not just foam-based FPV system, but FPV system in general are proliferating around across the world, but there is no analysis on the microplastic degradation that they're causing. And since this the microplastic have been found all the way up to the Arctic, and this system use plastic for the installation, it is important to quantify that and monitor that to get ahead of the curve so that we can prevent the potential damage if there is any. Our study has resulted in the publication of 5 academic papers, and one is currently under review. And the journals where it was published reflect the cross-disciplinary nature of our study. So we publish in Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, in Hardware X, International Journal of Hydrogen, Renewable Energy, and Sustainable Energy and Fuels. We use the following references in this presentation. And before I end my presentation, I would like to acknowledge all the funding organisms that contributed financially or technically to this study. Specifically, a big shout out to Frederick from the Jericho Lab and from the people at Solcast who supplied us with solar data. And I would like to specifically thank again the committee members, the personnel at the ESW field station managers, Grant and Caroline. A big shout out to you. My lab mates and my co-authors. For my lab mates, there are so many of them. I don't want to specify names in case of frustrating anyone, but you guys are amazing, and you made this PhD journey, that is a difficult one, easier. And I would like to give a big shout out to my advisor for his unconditional support throughout this journey. Also, a big shout out to all of my friends across the world, some of them that are in this presentation, attending this presentation today. Big shout out to my found family in Canada, Marissa and her family and her friends. I'm thinking of you. Thank you for supporting me. And finally, my family in Togo, my sister, my mom, my 2 sisters, my mom, my 2 brothers, my little uncle, all of who, without their support, I wouldn't be here today. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And all of our articles are open source. You can find them on Apropedia under FAST, and I will be taking any questions from the public. Feel free to ask questions. It's important for the public to engage with this kind of research, especially in this day of an age where research is being questioned. We would like to take questions that you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kwame. Thank you to everybody. Just a very quick announcement for those of you on the committee, you should have a new Zoom link for the actual exam at 1 o'clock, along with all the questions that came in a secondary email. And right now, if you will hold your questions, and this will just be questions from the audience. And so if you would like to ask Kwame a question, please raise your hand, and hopefully you'll move to the top of our screen, and then we can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. I'm sure Frederick, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. Thank you, Kwame, for the excellent presentation. I just had a quick question about slide 26. When you said, for example, that the configuration number 3 would lose 14.5%, I was wondering, compare with what? Does it mean that the bubbler system was not able to provide a net energy gain, or I missed something?
No, so what this means here is that in configuration 1 and 2, the bubblers are only placed at the edge of the system. So that is when we run the calculation, because we in our model, we were able to determine exactly how many bubblers are needed to cover the entire system. So it's not just at the edge that they're supposed to be. They're supposed to cover the entire system. However, this is technically expensive. So one way that we did it in our experiment, because our budget was limited, we only located the bubblers at the edge of our system. That is 1 and 2. In configuration 3, what happens is because there is so many bubblers, the system requires more energy to prevent the ice from forming. And that amount of energy compared to the total annual energy production of the system is 14.5%. So in configuration 3, you will use 14.5% of your annual energy to prevent ice formation.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you, Kwame.
No worries.
Nima, please go ahead.
Uh, Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kwame, for your great work and your great presentation. My question is about, again, like bubbler system. I'm not sure if I missed that part that you mentioned or just for double checking. About the energy, you already mentioned that the amount of energy that this bubbling system can use during the year. But have you done any trade-off on the amount of excess energy that kind of provide by preventing by deforestation and preventing the snow creation on the PV? Or do you have any ballpark view from the existing literature or your own numbers and data?
In terms of the existing literature, it's possible for floating PV system to have a gain, an energy gain between, and it was quantified anywhere between 3 all the way to 15%. So depending on the because this system, yes, we design it for foam-based FPV, but it can also work, let's say, for a pontoon-based FPV, which has a much more better tilt angle and less irradiation loss than what our system suggests here, especially in an latitude like Canada. So in those systems, if you're able to reach the 15% uh, energy improvement shown in the literature, you are able to offset even in configuration 3 the losses.
Mhm. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Any other last questions? Oh, Marissa?
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. And I wanted to ask, maybe why did you choose to test your systems in cold climates instead of maybe warmer regions where solar energy is more common?
Thank you for that question. So, it is true that at this tilt angle, especially at 0 tilt degree angle, this system would perform much better in a lower latitude where there is more sun. However, the energy crisis is hitting almost everywhere in the world, and due to the solution that we're trying to find to curb carbon emission from other energy generation, it is important to test this in all environments due to the nature of research itself. So therefore, Canada presents an area for us where we are able to test our system in this type of harsh environment that are not found in warmer places.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, oh, sorry. Frederick, go ahead.
Yeah, one more. So you mentioned that in your literature review, there was no proposed metrics for the FPV-caused water quality improvement. But did you come up with a suggestion? What would it look like if we were to measure that?
Definitely, that's a very good question. In our paper, we did mention some possible avenue that could be used. One of them being using open source sensors, such as the Jericho data acquisition system, to actually collect water temperature, but not only, also collect biological data from the water. Like, for example, before you install your FPV system, you can monitor the water temperature, and after that, monitor the water temperature afterward. See if the foam-based FPV causes the water to heat up or cool down, and then see how that impacts marine life and quantify that in terms of percentage improvement. So that will be one way to do it. But for those more in-depth studies needs to be done in the future to be able to come up with a reliable way of quantifying that.
Thank you, Komi. Yeah, seems a really interesting avenue. Thanks.
Great. Well, Thank you, everybody. We're just about at the end of our time. Look forward to seeing the committee at 1 o'clock and everyone else. Let's give Kwame another round of applause. A really excellent presentation. And I think showing the future of FPV is very bright, even in Canada. So thank you all very much.